I think the big winner for the Bronson movies for us was, and I again stupidly I knew of the movie but I hadn't seen it, and that is From Noon Till Three from 1976.
Charles Bronson. You've seen it like this, and like this. But you've never seen Bronson like this, or like this. Now, Charles Bronson.
Me.
And Jill Ireland.
Wowie yourself.
In From Noon Till Three. It's a love story, too good to be true.
I hope that wasn't meant to be an insult.
What a fucking movie, man. Wow.
For me, the first hour of this movie is one of the most charming things I've ever seen, period. Like the first hour is just, I'm falling in love with Bronson in a way I've never done before. It's him as con man to fool her, and then him as romantic icon, and him like dancing and just being playful. I was utter joy. And then the second half, which I still really like, but it's a very different movie. It's a satire. It's a straight like arrowed satire. And so I just had never seen this one. It's one I'd kind of avoided the cover and love Bronson, but it was a bit of a revelation that first hour for me.
Oh, that's really good. So neither one of you two had seen this one before.
No, I knew of it but hadn't seen it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, well, this is a movie that's built to be a surprise. All right, that kind of takes people by surprise. Like the setup of this movie is. Bronson is part of a rascally, a threadbare robbery gang in the Old West. They're going to rob a bank in this town, and Bronson has a dream the night before that the robbery is going to go bad.
It's a great dream sequence, by the way.
It's a really
because you don't know it's a dream. you think it's the opening of the movie. It's great.
It's really good. It's a really good dream sequence. So he has this dream that things aren't going to go bad. It's a bad omen, and so without making it obvious, he's trying to do whatever he can to maybe get out of it. And then on the way to town, they come across his horse gets lame, and on the way to the town, they come across this house out in the middle of nowhere. And it's a widow played by Jill Ireland, who's just in this house by herself. And he conspires that he's just going to have to miss the robbery because they have a lame horse, and she actually has a horse in the barn, but he goes in the barn and says that's not there. And they're going to have to, we're just going to have to go without sorry guys, I want to join you, but I can't.
Ah, shoot.
And they go, okay, so it's 12 o'clock right now. It'll take us about an hour to get to town. So we should be, we should be back around 3 o'clock. So he's going to be there for 3 hours, from noon till 3. And so he's stuck there with Jill Ireland as his hostage for these 3 hours. And the thing is, at first, there's obviously a tension between them. She is his hostage. He wants to have sex with her. She's fighting against that, but then he starts trying to con her. But then what ends up happening I don't want to spoil a bunch of all the machinations that end up happening. But what ends up happening, though, is eventually, like the way you kind of figure it will, they end up having this love affair, all right? They end up having this, like, straight out of a romance novel. They end up having this magnificent 3 hours together. I don't want to reveal too much of what happens after that, but you do have to explain one thing, though, while keeping it still ambiguous. A bunch of misunderstandings end up happening where that I won't go into. But the upshot is she thinks he's dead after this 3 hours. Something happens after this 3 hours. So she thinks she had the most romantic, wonderful moment of her life in these 3 hours with the most dashing, handsome, most honorable cowboy who ever lived. Well, we know that that's not the case. He did fall in love with her during the course of the 3 hours, but he was just trying to get in her pants, and he's a complete liar. He's a complete scoundrel. He's a complete scum. He's a complete con man. He's not anything that she thinks he is. Everything he said to her was a lie until eventually he did fall in love with her, but everything he said was a lie. And then she writes a novel about it. And the novel becomes one of the biggest novels in the history of, for the West, modern literature. And where, I mean, it's read all over the world, and everybody knows about him, and everybody knows about their affair, and everybody knows everything that happened. She becomes a huge celebrity. He becomes a post-Amos celebrity. All right.
He becomes Toller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now everything, she doesn't remember anything about what he really was like. She remembers him as not looking like Charles Bronson, but looking like Clark Gable, all right, by comparison, that he was much taller, he was this, he was that. Because it's all her, this fantasy of what the experience was. Bronson isn't dead, but she doesn't know that. But the thing that's hysterical about the novel becoming so popular, and where everybody read it, and it becoming this pop culture for the time sensation. The novel is very much like The Bridges of Madison County.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same novel.
Wow, that's so funny.
Okay, the lonely woman out in the house by herself. The stranger guy comes into the town, comes into the house. They meet. They have this. They're a little wary of each other for a little bit. Then they have this magnificent romantic encounter where their whole little world is encompassed into this short time that they have together in her house. And then he leaves forever, and then she will leave, and then that will be the moment that she'll remember for the rest of her life. That novel comes out, and every woman in the world reads it, and it becomes this huge sensation that everybody talks about. That's the novel she writes in From Noon Till Three.
So cool.
Yeah.
But this is a piss take on that entire concept of a romantic novel.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it's the gender battle for sure. Like, it's the perception of how each gender seems to see something, because that key moment in this whole movie seems to be the one you were highlighting at the starts with, when he goes into the stable and comes back and says there's no horse.
Yeah.
His posse, take it at face value, kind of. They challenge him on it. But really, she thinks he's defending her honor.
Yeah, she thinks he's being chivalrous.
Yeah, and that's what changes the whole perspective of the movie from that moment for her.
Brownie's a lovely pet. Thank you for not taking him.
Yeah.
Well,
It's so great. I mean, and I think it's kind of good saying that's the way it is in a lot of relationships at the start. Everything we're doing from our perspective is for one thing, and they're seeing it another way, and it's really well crafted on that level.
Yeah, and
it's written by Frank D. Gilroy, who also wrote the play and the movie. The subject was Roses, who was a very, very famous writer, and he wrote and directed this. And there's also an incredible romantic element to even the movie being made that I actually think adds to the romantic quality to the movie that you're watching. It's the only, once Bronson became like a superstar, once the 70s started happening officially, it's the only Charles Bronson movie that you could really say is truly offbeat. I think it's his only like out and out comedy that he did during that time. But it's the only truly offbeat movie he did. The only movie that wasn't made for his audience to at least one degree or another. It's actually not made for his audience. And it's one of the things, it's the tricky part of the movie, because it's not necessarily what a Charles Bronson audience wanted to see at that time. And the audience that would really be into watching the movie are trepidatious about watching a Western starring Charles Bronson. I mean, it's the kind of movie your wife would love if you could convince her to sit down and watch it.
Right.
But you would really have a hard time convincing her to sit down and watch a 70s Charles Bronson or what Western. Well, it's not really that. It's not, but it's still a hard ask, even though, you know, so it flies in the face of the audience it was intended for and the audience that actually, you know, was drawn to it. But so there's that aspect. But the thing about it that I think is actually really charming is Bronson could kind of do anything he wanted. He chose to do the movie. And I think it's obvious, completely obvious. The reason he chose to do the movie was to give Jill Ireland a great role.
Yeah.
To, you know, to not have her just be an appendage, have her be a legitimate co-lead in the film, maybe even have the better role. And that's why he chose to do this movie. And the Bronson knew good material when he read it. And I think he definitely respected Frank D. Gilroy. So I think, you know, he responded to the movie. But the reason he did the movie was for Jill Ireland, to give Jill Ireland this kind of role. And the thing that's actually kind of that I found so charming when I watched it was the idea that, look, at a certain point, Bronson wanted Jill Ireland in his movies because he wanted her around. He just wanted her around. And so whether she was cast well or not, she's there. And whether the character is that good or not, she's there. And actually, oftentimes the female roles that she played in his movies weren't that great of a role, like this is like the only time you've ever watched it of all the movies they did together. It's the only time you ever watched a Charles Bronson Jill Ireland movie where they actually look like they're having fun together. But whether she was well cast or not, she's there. Whether or not the character was miserable, she's there. You know, like the prostitute girlfriend in The Mechanic, or the wife in Valanchy Papers or whatever. This is the only movie that they did together where she's better cast than he is.
Yep.
He's very good in the movie, but she's perfectly cast in this film. She actually is on more solid ground than he is in this movie. Yeah. And I think she's truly wonderful in the film.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. I mean, I'm always a fan of, you know, real life couples in movies because you can feel that chemistry. Obviously, they were married at the time. And yeah, it's one of the most romantic real life couple movies I think I've ever seen in terms of that, you know? Yeah,
I think the only other role she ever got after this that where she kind of leads the duo, and she's also perfectly cast is another Peter Hunt movie. Is the film he did, Assassination?
Oh yeah,
where she plays she plays the persnickety first lady. And Bronson's the Secret Service guy, and then the guys are trying to kill her, and then they're on the run together. And she's a really good, like Nancy Reagan style first lady.
Yeah, she's good in that. Wow, I haven't seen that one in forever. That's cool. Yeah.
But she's got a good, strong character, and she's the leader. She's the leader in that duo as well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like you say, you don't want to say too much more about the movie because it has surprises and it just is so charming, and the ending is not at all what I necessarily expected, but I still kind of love the ending despite.
Yeah, I love that last moment. I love it, but I love the whole last 15 minutes of just one goddamn thing after another for the fucking guy.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty hilarious, you know.
Okay, you have to talk about it in a way that we don't spoil it. But I actually, one of my favorite lines I'll say in it, or that won't mean anything out of context, but once you've seen the movie, I mean something. It's when he goes, "It didn't happen that way. I didn't want to go. She made
me." Yeah, it's so, oh man. Yeah, what a surprise though, because I just did not, especially that third act, I definitely didn't see coming. Like I had an idea of what I thought it might be, but then to see the third act play out was, you just don't get that many movies that surprise you and charm you in the way that this one did. So of all the movies we watch, and there's a lot of great stuff here, this is definitely one of the ones I think we recommend, and obviously you do too. People, check this movie out, because wow, it's just.
And I gotta say, hadn't seen it since it came out, it was like right from the opening comedy dream sequence on. It's like there's nothing in this movie there's almost not a scene in the movie that's quite expected. That nothing, you can't even imagine it going to where it goes in the last 20 minutes, but you can't really imagine where it's going to go after the first 20 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
It was delightful. So thank you for
but truly, it's the weird turns and the weird surprises of the narrative is part of the juice of this movie. That's why we have to talk about it cryptically.
Yeah.
But go check it out. You won't be disappointed.